We need to talk about toxic workplace recovery. You were in a toxic work environment, you managed to escape, but what happens next? I'm going to be diving into different strategies to help you recover from a toxic workplace in today's video. But before, I just want to say hello and welcome back to my channel where I help you slay your career and cultivate the successful life you deserve. If you haven't already, click that subscription button and the notification bell. I release 2 new videos each week. And to be clear, I recorded this video and the audio was absolute trash. So I decided to just turn on the camera and re-record it and talk to you guys about toxic workplace recovery, what it's really like, what to expect, and the ditches that you probably don't think that you're gonna encounter, that you're gonna fall in if you don't know about them. So do make sure that you stay through the whole video because I don't want you to miss anything. Now, I'm not gonna beat around the bush in terms of toxic workplace recovery. We're going to jump right into it right after you tap that like button. So if you just go ahead and tap that right now, we're gonna get into the first strategy to recover from a toxic workplace, which is to acknowledge the trauma. And I know that this sounds like really big, and as soon as I said trauma, your instinct was probably to downplay what you have just gone through in your toxic work environment. Like, oh, it's not that bad, it's not trauma. But we need to call things what they are. I'm not saying that everything is severe trauma, but there is trauma that you have experienced in that toxic workplace if you were in a truly toxic work environment. Because let's be real, shit is down in a toxic work environment. When we think about toxic workplace behaviors, which are very common, and maybe you've seen some of them, if not all of them, there's things like gossiping, undermining, undervaluing by your toxic boss or your toxic coworkers. And these are all things that can have a dramatic impact on you going forward. This can have a real impact on you and what you're bringing into the next job. You can lose trust, confidence, and even your sense of worthiness to be in the position that you're in. And if we don't acknowledge it, we're not going to be able to recover from that toxic workplace effectively. And that means that we're going to bring all of the baggage from that terrible relationship that we were in directly into our next one. We absolutely do not want to do that, my friend. So we need to start by acknowledging what you have just been through. And I'm telling you all of this because when I was in a toxic workplace, I did the exact same thing. I was just like, oh, it was just a bad environment. I'm just gonna shake it off, no worries. But the thing is that it can actually start to seep out in different ways. And it doesn't always look like walking around feeling terrible about yourself, never trusting anyone, and having an ultra negative attitude. But sometimes it is going to seep out in different ways if we don't actually address it. So my friend, I want you to start here and just acknowledging what you have actually been through. Once we do that, that is going to bring us into our next strategy to recover from a toxic workplace, and that is to be kind to yourself. One of the things that comes up most frequently when I speak with someone or work with a client who's been in a toxic work environment, whether they had a toxic boss, they were dealing with toxic coworkers, they were facing discrimination in the workplace, one thing that is so consistent is that in some way they're blaming themselves for what happened. Also, when we consider the negativity in a toxic workplace, it kind of ends up surrounding you like we've talked about in some of my previous videos. And this can end up becoming something that you really begin to internalize. So whether it's your toxic boss who is doubting you or trying to undermine you on a consistent basis, or the toxic coworker who has you living on edge because of all of the malicious gossip that is going on, you can actually begin to internalize that and start to experience a lot of self-doubt where it didn't necessarily exist before. I also think that being in a toxic work environment makes us overly sensitive to the negative aspects of ourselves and any company that we're working for going forward. This is really bringing your tolerance level from like here down to like here, like you're at 0 or below 0. While I want you to begin to recognize those patterns, I also want you to be really kind to yourself and realize that it is a result not of something that is fundamentally wrong or fundamentally flawed with you, but it is a direct result of being in that toxic work environment. And noticing those patterns is a step that you're going to take in your toxic workplace recovery. And this actually leads me directly into the next strategy to recover from a toxic workplace. And this is a trap that so many toxic workplace survivors fall into. You need to stop blaming yourself. When you accepted that job, you did not accept the toxic workplace behavior. You did not sign on to work with a toxic boss alongside toxic coworkers and accept their awfulness, discrimination, and whatever else that they were throwing at you. And the fact that you stayed doesn't mean that you were consenting to it. For starters, sometimes it takes a while for us to recognize that we are in a toxic workplace. One thing that I very frequently see with people that are in a toxic work environment, and I totally had this when I was personally in a toxic work environment, is that cognitive dissonance really kicks in. That's where you start to justify and rationalize the things that you're seeing, the behaviors you're experiencing, and the situation that you're in to explain that it's really not that abnormal. So first of all, we have that big blocker in terms of recognition. And then if you're like most people, when you do realize that you are in a toxic work environment and it's having an adverse effect, you can't necessarily just walk in the next day and quit your job. Most of us need a paycheck to pay our bills. And compounding all of that is that toxic companies, toxic coworkers, toxic bosses have a phenomenal ability to gaslight you into thinking that the issue isn't them, that the issue is you. And I think that's one of the main reasons why so many toxic workplace survivors really do blame themselves, because the gaslighting is really making you believe that there is something that is wrong with you, that the issue is a you thing, when really the issue is your toxic boss, the issue is your toxic coworker, the issue is the toxic work environment that they have created. But the good news is, at least I hope, because you're watching this, that you are actually in that recovery, that you had your exit strategy, you have gotten out, you're in your next role, or you're looking for your next role. The next thing that you need to do in order to recover from your toxic workplace is to process the hurt. Remember, a toxic work environment isn't just a company that you don't really like. That's just a company that you don't like. A toxic work environment is a highly corrosive environment, and I'm not here to diagnose anyone, but often we will see that there may be some level of personality disorder involved with a toxic boss or toxic coworker that you are working with. Ultimately, a toxic work environment is created by toxic people that you are working with, no matter where in the corporate structure they are sitting. And toxic people can cause real harm to your confidence, to your self-esteem, and to so much more. And just to be clear, it's not necessarily the toxic person that you are working with in this toxic work environment that is going to be the one that is causing the harm. Sometimes this harm might actually be coming from someone that you liked, someone that you trusted, someone that was actually supporting you in that toxic work environment. This goes deep. This is not necessarily a surface level identification. So there's several things that you can do in order to process what you've been through and realize where that hurt lies, any feelings of distrust and betrayal and things like that. Now, how you actually process this is going to be very individual. So I'm not going to tell you through a video exactly what you specifically need to do, because it's going to be different for you as it was for me, as it was for some of my clients. But things that I frequently see being leveraged, and I personally have done and have found to be very helpful, were journaling, meditation, reading books, and going to therapy. Once you leave that toxic work environment, you do not want to walk around, and especially into your next job, with all of those feelings, the resentment, the mistrust, whatever it is that is coming up for you, and the different ways that it is showing up after you have left the toxic workplace. Leverage any tool that feels right for you in order to help you process what you have been through and recover from that toxic work environment. Now, as you're doing this, you're probably going to implement the next strategy right along with it. The next strategy to help you recover from that toxic workplace is to do a reality check. Refamiliarizing yourself with your awesomeness is something that might be very essential. Because toxic people at work are often overly negative, they're criticizing you unfairly, they're toxic people, like we've talked about so much. But you know that they're just, they're making you feel bad about yourself. And that is why the workplace was toxic for you. But remembering all of your unique awesomeness and your unique awesomeness quotient isn't just important for you in your toxic workplace recovery. It's also really crucial for you to be able to slay in your next role, because you're going to know what you're awesome, what you bring to the table, what you can focus on that's going to move you forward in your career. I have a whole workshop to help you identify your UAQ, but I think the more that you become aware and intellectually see all of the awesomeness that you bring to the table, and what a fantastic professional you are, and why you are so valuable and an asset to a company that is also going to help you as you recover from your toxic workplace. And it's also going to help you bring the next strategy to life to recover from your toxic workplace, and that is to rebuild your confidence. Bear in mind that everyone's response and the impact of a toxic workplace is going to be different. So you might walk out the door still feeling really confident. Personally, I did. My confidence is pretty unshakable, which is especially useful here in the comments section sometimes. But just because you don't feel like your confidence has been hampered doesn't mean that it has not been hampered across the board. There may be situations and circumstances which actually bubble up where you feel less confident than you would have before. And unfortunately, the confidence hit from a toxic workplace can show up at the most inconvenient times. And also know that sometimes there is just a trigger that is going to happen in the future, that even when you have recovered from your toxic work environment, you've processed it all, that it's just going to come up sometimes. Now, I want you to be prepared for if you ever experience one of those pangs of loss of confidence. And it's actually very simple when you're ready for it to overcome it. All you need is to implement some of the instant confidence boosters that I share in this video. I really hope that this video helped you make a plan to recover from your toxic work environment. If you feel like it did, give it a like. Let me know what you are going to implement first down in the comments below. If you haven't already, of course, consider subscribing. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.